Hello, folks. It is Saturday, April 23rd, and I'm going to be starting with the Forex analysis for next week. Diving right after this, we'll be into stocks. So let's get started. First off, AUD CAD. As we've seen over the last several weeks, it's been kind of ranging in between this entire area. Right? So what I intended for was an original reversal at around this mark here, but it ended up blasting right through that. So my second sort of area for a reversal was around here, and I believe it was on the 4 hour that that I was able to catch it. Yeah, there it is. All right, so this is kind of the spot where I'm expecting it to bounce off of and go into the upward direction. So let's draw a long position here just for having this kind of drawn up already. All right, so I would say 20 pips would be a very reasonable drop. And judging from where it's been going on right now, I might even make it all the way up here and do 30 pips instead, or maybe even 25. 25 should be more than enough. I don't expect it to drop past that point, and if it does, then analysis is incorrect. But what can I say? I digress. But judging from how high these peaks were previously, I would just bring it up to as high as the previous one is for maximum TP gain. That's almost a 13 to 1 risk to reward ratio. But the one thing that I want to explain is anytime that there's sharp moves like this, I would take it on the 1 hour and wait for an EMA switch, right? Rather than entering right at your starting line, as soon as it dives below it, setting a buy stop would be much more ideal than setting a buy limit, right? Buy limit means that as soon as this line would be crossed, your trade is triggered. Now, if it keeps going, it could stop you out, right, before reversing and actually going into profit. That's why I personally like it when it comes down here. Then I set a buy stop, so it doesn't matter how much lower it goes, but as soon as it crosses this line, that's when the trade triggers and you'll already start in profit, ideally, right? You don't want to jump into a trade and it starts going down on you immediately. So safe bet, right? Wait for that EMA to switch once it hits this area, and if it kind of bounces off and hits, then you know what? Your entry will be somewhere up here. It's really not that big a deal. It's better to play it safe rather than jumping in too soon. So, do whatever you feel is comfortable. I would say that from this area would be a pretty significant starting point for myself. EMA switch would be the safer bet, right? And if I'm comfortable on the 1 hour, on the 4 hour, definitely. When you see an EMA switch here, it typically is a good sign that it's going to continue for quite some time. All right. So yeah, that's my trade idea for AUD CAD. We'll leave that one green. AUD CHF. This one has dropped significantly. Look how beautiful this is, right? We already set this up. It's already in profit. There's nothing to do but watch it go. All right, so currently it's sitting at about 111 pips in profit. Fantastic. Let's move on to the next. AUD JPY, anything drawn up here? Nope. I had previous lines set for, I believe they were just points of control, but nothing too significant right now. It's been heading back to this area. I would probably say AUD is still going to be stronger than JPY. JPY just kind of took over in the last few days, but on the 4 hour time frame, I would say that this would be a safe bet to take a long position on as well. Since we're looking at a AUD CAD long position once it hits down there, same sort of idea would be right there. As soon as there's any pullback on the same specific type of currency pair, it's usually a good sign that you want to take it higher. This one I would draw it probably just a little bit below these wicks right there, so 33 pips, and for a potential of 300, 304, still a 9 to 1 ratio approximately. Now let's go with that. Same idea on the 1 hour, well, waiting for an EMA switch, right? Like I said, if it happens sooner, then it happens sooner. You know, somewhere up here, and that's still fine. It'll just be a shorter TP gain. AUD NZD, you know, it hasn't actually come back to this point. Like once I drew it up kind of last week from here, it hasn't actually come back. It just kind of took off and never really returned. So if it does return, I still wouldn't be comfortable taking that trade just because AUD NZD is typically a little bit more volatile. So I'll leave that one alone. I'm going to erase that trade idea. AUD USD. Now this one was just beautiful. Look at this. Wow. Met TP. That's it. You know, gains were done. It's exactly what I predicted would have happened. This was a beautiful win. You know, chalk that up as a 12-1, right? 229 pips. 232. The lowest it went was 242. Fantastic. So AUD USD, that was a winner. As far as any potential for it to reverse on or where it's going to go next, let's see. I would say maybe around this area. It could drop even lower. So if the TP wasn't set right now, it's definitely possible to ride it out even longer, but that was a beautiful drop. You know, just as predicted, it did very, very well. BTC USD, how did this one fare? I would say that it fared kind of exactly as predicted as well. It hit off of that volume bar, volume support. It kind of wicked off the 50, almost at the 50% here, and it's been hovering around this area too. So it seems to me like it's a very safe bet to be able to grab a trade for a buy, right? It doesn't really show that it has any interest going lower. And typically Bitcoin runs very similarly to the NASDAQ. So if I see a pullback this deep, but it hasn't actually gone lower than previous March 15th lows, that is a good sign, which means that both will start climbing in the short term. Okay, so CAD CHF, let's see what we have here. I expected a drop to happen there, you know, kind of did, but I don't think that really counts. We had a reversal up here. This is actually a really good sign. I would take this entry level and bring it right there. It happened a little later than expected, but I believe that this is going to pull down pretty hard. CHF is showing a lot of neutrality, and the Canadian currency, it's, you know, a little bit volatile. Yes, Canada has increased its rates, and that's what you saw, this kind of move upwards, right? But I think it's kind of peaked, right? It's been oversold for quite some time, so I have a feeling that instead of the pullback being here, this is where it started. And as you see, even on the 4-hour, we had the EMA switch. You know, the pink and the white are starting to taper off. They're going to be going horizontally soon. This is going to be a very strong position to take it on a sell. You know, potential 12-1 as well on that one. CAD JPY, right? As we saw, CAD was slowing down. JPY, I believe that AUD JPY will start to strengthen right down here, but CAD JPY I'm not entirely sure on. It is very possible that CAD will have the same impact as AUD does, but right now there isn't a spot for me to kind of take a trade on a buy. With the trend, as far as it'll pull back, I might guess it'll be down to this zone, but I'm not too certain on this one. This was very, very strong for it to come all the way up here, you know, where we drew that previous position, so that's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, that would have been great to take on a sell, but it was missed by me, unfortunately. CHF JPY, nothing really drawn up on here. It's moving similarly to the other currency pairs. I believe JPY will still be, it had a little bit of juice last week, but I believe that that's going to run short with CHF especially. DXY, so the dollar is overvalued right now. $1 is worth $1.01, right? So it's a little bit odd, but here we are. You know, the US dollar is worth more than $1. It is what it is, but it's a little bit odd, right? If the dollar is worth more and yet in AUD USD, oh no, that would make total sense. The USD would be making AUD drop significantly harder, right? If the dollar is valued high. Ethereum USD, so right here, same sort of play as in Bitcoin. This one just went a little bit deeper, but it seems that over the last 24 hours, we've had a little bit more of a dip, and then it's starting to pull up now. Okay, so let's switch that over to the 1 hour and kind of analyze it a little bit more, because Ethereum and Bitcoin have a really strong impression on the NASDAQ, right? So as you can see right here was March. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong time frame. But April 18th makes a lot of sense as well, because about last week we wicked off a certain area, and we're coming pretty close to that now too. This is going to take a little longer, so let me see. On March, right here, I believe it was March 15th, right? So as you can see, not even close to being down in the same range. So what that shows us is cryptocurrencies overall are not as bearish as stocks at the moment, right? Does that mean that investor strength is going to be going more towards cryptocurrency or more towards stocks? Here's the thing, they both rise and fall at the same rate, right? So if the New York Stock Exchange is in a bear market, cryptocurrency will be in a bear market. And that's not me making any speculations, that's just observation, right? Once you saw Bitcoin hit its peak right here, right? So we'll switch back over to that so you can see. Go over to the daily time frame, right? November 10th. November 10th, it hit its peak. Now let's take a look at the NASDAQ. When did we hit our peak on the NASDAQ? November 19th. So just a short while later, but November 10th, we were right there. We almost had a peak, and then we had another bullish run for one more week, right? How did it look like right here? November 10th, we dipped a little bit, and then November 15th, we started dropping, right? NASDAQ hit its peak November 22nd and then started dropping from there on. But as you see, the structure, Bitcoin was much more exaggerated than the NASDAQ, because NASDAQ only dropped about 23% in total, while Bitcoin dropped over 50%, right? So the movement was similar, but Bitcoin was much more exaggerated. Okay, don't mind all these lines, these are just for my own personal analysis. All right, so moving on, we are just past Ethereum. So Euro AUD. Now this is a very good sign as well, because Euro has finally gotten a little bit of juice, and it bounced right off of that zone about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and now it's starting to climb. So on the daily, that's a good sign that we have a reversal. On the 4 hour, everything is lining up beautifully. So that means on Euro AUD, it's a very strong chance that this will continue upwards, because it has been showing significant moves to the upside without any slowdown, right? It's just been steadily going in the up direction, and that's exactly what we're looking for when it's a chance to take a steady trade, right? So at what point would we bounce off of this? Let's take a look at a larger time frame, right? So right now we just hit previous resistance zone, right? So it bounced up, and what zone was that? So if we take a look at the Fibonacci, it'll give us a better indication as to where it was. So that was almost the 50%, right? If we count the wick, that's exactly at the 50% mark. So we're almost back up to that level. That's going to be key. If we don't break through this, it's going to start going back down. If we do break through that, that's great, because our next zone will be somewhere around there where the Fibonacci originally began. So what we can do is do a trend-based fib extension right now to see where our possible highs might go. Right, so because that is much lower than the previous one, that's going to show us a move that is not favorable. That doesn't make sense. So best one to do is in the long term, right, to see where a potential reversal could occur. All right, and judging by that, we might see any sort of move around that 1.509 mark. That's entirely possible, but I don't think it's likely to happen until we reach this area, right? Because we had a bit of resistance here before dropping, then taking it higher to a peak. So I believe the first area of resistance for the Euro AUD will be about that 1.5148, around that area. So that means this still has potentially about 247, 240 pips to go, right? Something like that. So right now the move's already happened. There wasn't anywhere for me to gauge as to where that would have been coming. Around within this wick, though, like I could already tell you that there was some sort of information that could be gathered from it. So let's take a look. Let's throw it a replay and see what significance is in this wick in order for us to be able to see if there was a valid trade or not. Right? And what I can tell you right now is this play within the 1 hour. I'm just going to box it up to make sure I have the right one. I believe I do. Right there. Okay, so we switch it to the 1 hour. Right? So it's these group of candles right here. So we'll switch it to the 30-minute. Right? Nothing really of interest. Yeah, so I guess within that wick, it was just a proper movement, you know, nothing of significance. So there's nothing that it would really return to. This is just kind of market structure. It has nothing to do with any manipulation on this one. Okay. All right. So overall, I do expect Euro AUD to start climbing. It might just take a little while longer than expected. Especially as far as the last several days have been going. It's kind of been going sideways, right? But that's good. As soon as it starts piling up like this, there's going to be a move coming very imminently. Judging by the strength of the currencies and where it was going before, I expect it to start going to the upside. Euro CAD. What did we have here? You know, very nice move as well. I was expecting originally a move around back up to this area, and it seems that we're climbing there right now. But there wasn't really a spot for me to analyze to know where it would be bouncing from. As you saw, it was making lower lows, and it never really retraced back to one of those areas. It just kind of kept going higher. The only thing that it did was during this climb right here, it left a large imbalance candle, right? So for here, that would have been a good opportunity to be able to do a measurement, right? And 20, like, let's see, from entry, about 35 pips, 34 pips would have been a reasonable stop loss. So yeah, that would have been a good thing to snag. My attention was focused elsewhere over the last few days, unfortunately. You know, I've been focusing on stocks too, and I really needed to mitigate some damage that Netflix caused, not particularly that I had the Netflix stock. It's just everything surrounding it caused the NASDAQ to drop almost 1,000 points, right? Not even counting the Dow Jones, which dropped nearly 2,000 within 2 days. So that was some significant mitigation needed. You know, while it's dropping and you have buy calls, the smart thing to do is grab a couple of sells to kind of rather than closing off at a significant loss. Those sells will help recuperate the damage until you see the reversal happening. Then you close them off and ride it back up, you know. So you can make money both ways. That's kind of the idea. You just have to be unbiased when you take those positions, right? You can't be, oh, it'll go up now, I'm going to take another buy. Oh, it'll go up now, I'll take another buy, because that's how you're going to screw yourself, right? If you take a couple buys already and it's dropping and there's no sign of it reversing, take a sell, see where it goes, right? Like the worst that it'll happen is you'll break even on one of those calls, right? Like your sell will reverse and you'll break even back into the buys. And if it reverses right away, right? I mean, what's the damage that'll happen there? Your buys will be in profit and your sell will be at a loss. You'll break even, right? But it's all about mitigating any risk at that point. But use your own judgment for your own risk. I am not a financial advisor by any means. I just like to throw out some ideas here and there. Euro CHF. It hit our entry zone right there. That's a good sign. It took a while, but it finally did it. It did it once before as well, and it pulled all the way back up. But we see that this is a significant spot for it to kind of return to. So I think we're looking good, actually. if you miss the first entry right there in order to grab, how many was that? It was like over almost 400, 300 pips. Yeah, I mean, that would have been a nice 270, right? But if you miss that one, then there's still a potential for snagging a similar amount, right? I don't believe that it's going to go higher from here. And as you saw, that's exactly what it did. It kind of came up, hit this area right there, which we'll zoom in. It was just a bunch of wicks. So within the 30-minute time frame, we'd be able to see some more information, and then it's going to continue to drop. So excellent. We'll mark that one back up and remove that. Euro GBP. This was a fantastic move. I actually ended up jumping in on it somewhere around here. But the unfortunate thing is I brought my stop loss into profit, and then this kind of wigged me out. So it is what it is. I mean, I got a little too antsy, I guess, with moving it up. But as you see, it's a very stable, well, I want to say a stable climb, but not really. I mean, it was sharper each time, right? But as you see, it never kind of pulled back deeper than where it hit before. It would have been a good trade to stay in had I kept my stop loss at its original peak, or even if it was at the break even. But it got moved up too soon, so I made a small amount of profit and just kept climbing, right? It would have been a potential, I think it was somewhere around here. I grabbed it off a pivot line. Yeah, it would have been about over 100 pips right now, almost 100 pips. Not too bad. Right now, though, as far as taking an entry, I'd be looking for a pullback before climbing higher, or at least something like this to happen, right? So my first inclination is it's going to hit this area, because that is where, I'll tell you right now, it's a point of control that's happening. I got to draw the line first, right? So our point of control is right there. I'll draw the ray. Bam. Okay, and that's where it's going to be bouncing off first. And I would say that will be a good indication as to where it's going to hover for a little while and to take a potential entry. So we'll mark that up and switch to Euro JPY. What can I say? This one was gorgeous. It bounced off entry twice, right? So, I mean, if it got into here and you were already about 100 pips in profit, there's no reason why your stop loss would have still been at its original, right? So, unfortunately, if you kept it there and didn't take any profits, it would have hit entry again. But look at this climb. I mean, a potential of 431 pips. Like right now, it's sitting at 317, but this is one of my better calls, I would say. This is going very nicely. I don't expect it to be slowing down. We saw that pullback from JPY. I don't see any reason why this would stop. Euro NZD. Yeah, similar to Euro AUD, except NZD is a little bit weaker. It's been climbing, although I didn't see any potential entries on here before. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan of NZD pairs, so I stayed out. Euro USD. That was incredibly sharp, but that would make total sense judging as to how stocks have moved. So it's really strange, because when the US currency is incredibly strong on Forex, it shows on the stocks as investors kind of pulling out of their stocks or selling, and positions dropping significantly lower while the dollar gains value. It's really odd how that works, but it is what it is, and that's where we're at. Okay, so as far as entry here, I would say that would have been a pretty decent gauge as to get in there somewhere, but not really, not really a whole lot of info as to where it would bounce from. All we know is that it made a low, and then a higher low, and then a higher low, right? And with a higher high. So it's a good sign that this wants to go back up. It's a matter of time, I guess, but right now I'm going to stay out, only because it's still very volatile. It's moving too fast to be able to snag anything proper. GBP AUD, quite slow, but at the same time, it's doing very well. All right, so from entry to now, that's 255 pips in profit. Excellent. With a 34 pip stop loss almost, that is excellent. Right, we're expecting this to go a little bit higher, right, to this imbalance area. But so far it is looking very good, right? So entry would have been on the 12th, so about 2 weeks ago. Fantastic. It's still climbing as expected. GBP CAD, yeah, did not go as expected, so I just left this one alone. Not really much to say. I'm not gonna jump into that one. GBP CHF. Yeah, so this one was looking great too, but it was a sharp pullback, very, very sharp pullback over the last 2 days. So, it's quite possible that it will reverse again and head in the up direction, right? We'll just draw Fibonacci to give us a good understanding as to how deep it's gone already. So it's at the 50%, right? If it goes to the 618 and probably drops lower, I would say we may not be seeing a reversal, and if it is, going to be very deep. Otherwise, yeah, we might just continue on a climb. But at this point in time, it's hard to say whether to jump out of it or to kind of see where it goes. Partials would definitely be a good idea to be grabbed, right? But right now, at its peak, we were looking at about 330 pips in profit, and right now it's at 168. So again, not the worst thing in the world. Looking very good still overall for last week's and the week before's calls. Doing pretty good. GBP JPY, nothing mentioned here. Although, judging as to where JPY was over the last few months, this would have been kind of a no-brainer to snag as well. It's been climbing nonstop, right? Like if the snag was made kind of at its low right here, like let's be conservative even, right? Like as far as it's climbed right now, it's 1600 pips, 1500. Like now it's at 1300, and that's just crazy. Like what a climb. GBP NZD, similar to GBP AUD, that's been happening, but as you know, personally I do not like NZD pairs, so I step away. GBP USD, small little profit that it hit there, 3-1 was all right, but as you saw, the USD gained a lot of strength and it started moving everything to the downside. I expected this to go down, just not that soon. I thought it would pull up a little bit higher, at least to this white line right here, but it went one lower. And as it did that, it just sank, right? And it went down pretty hard, right? So if I saw the call happening there, that would have been a nice 200 pips to snag. NZD CAD. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, I expected this to go up, but NZD really has been showing some weakness over the last week, 2 weeks. NZD CHF, very messy, not interested. NZD JPY, yeah, so it's kind of been hovering around the same area. Like it has made a new high and it's not really going much lower. So this is a very strong possibility that this is as low as it's going to go and it'll reverse back up. That would be a little bit invalid. So even though I'm not a fan, this is looking very, very likely that an entry here would be pretty significant to take, around a 30 pip stop loss and maybe 200 pip gain. So 7-1 overall I think would be pretty good to take on that. We'll add a green there. NZD USD. Okay, so we can see right here, it's kind of an area of contention. Let's draw a volume from this peak down to that low. Where are we sitting at? Okay, so that's where the volume's at. It kind of tested it once. And then one more volume set, I would say, from here to, let's go all the way to the high. Let's see what information we get from that. All right, so the big one is right there. That's fine. Second highest is kind of there and there before, like around that range and there. Okay. But not really a whole lot there. It looks like it's kind of pulling down to there first. But yeah. Seems that it's a good chance that a trade kind of in this range would be a pretty good bet. I would make it maybe just of those, around a 43 pip stop loss for it to go higher. Go conservative first, maybe about 350 pips. 8-to-1 ratio is still pretty decent for that. Judging where the extreme zones are, I would say that we're probably looking at an imminent reversal, right? Like there was no wick on this red and just started going green as it closed in the 4 hour. Not a huge green by any means. But yeah, I would definitely wait for an EMA switch at least on the 1 hour on this one. There's no way, there's no reason to take a trade this early, right? As soon as yellow kind of crosses the red, that's kind of the first sign that we'd be looking for something in our direction, right? So even if it looks like that, that's something much better than even taking it while it's in the opposite direction, right? It would bring me comfort, that's for sure. And then ideally, if they would cross the pink and the pink would be pointing up, because this, if it's going sideways and it crosses the pink, it doesn't bring me much confidence, right? Okay, USD CAD. Damn, right? Not too shabby. I was saying about EMA switches. This one is a perfect example as to why not to jump in them right away. So if we shove that one over to the side first, right? And honestly, I wouldn't have taken this trade while it's going down that sharply, right? Only when it kind of hit this area, be like, you know what? Maybe I'll set my buy stop now. And as you saw, it's just a beautiful climb up now, right? So overall, that trade is currently 172 pips in profit. It's looking pretty good. USD CHF, I'll mark that one green. USD CHF, not really marked up, but overall, I just did expect this to be going up. Yeah, I didn't really think about any potential entry zones. I just left it alone. USD JPY, same idea. Every JPY pair has been moving similarly, but there wasn't really an entry for me to gauge off of this. I mean, if I analyzed it for a few more hours and just kind of stared at it, yeah, I'd be able to point some stuff out, but it'd be really looking for something and trying to find. I like the more obvious things, right? There's no sense in trying to dive into pairs that, have less obvious trades that are visible. I mean, comparatively to, where are we at? AUD CAD, let's say, where we see something like that, that's a little bit more obvious. AUD USD, the trade that was already taken, that was pretty obvious. So something like that is what I like to grab. I don't want to be second guessing a bunch of currency pairs. XAG USD, so silver dropping hard with the strength of the US dollar. But as you see here, we're really hitting a support zone, right? So very good sign that we're going to be going back up. Okay, so here we go. Good support zone. Kind of bounced through it a few times right there and there. If we break through it, then that's a good sign the US dollar is going to be much, much stronger. If we bounce off and start going up, which it seems that this is going to be the case, it's been resisting several times and it's been slowing down over the last few hours before close, right, from its momentum on the downward. It's a good chance that this will start going back up. Similarly to what you saw here, right? It kind of went up, shot down quickly, and then back up, and then started moving toward the upside in the long term, right? So sharp moves down, tapered off kind of in that volume spike right here, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I'll show you when it comes volume from high to low. A lot of it's going to be where the big concentrations are, right? So 1, 2, and then 3 right here, kind of on the top and on the bottom there, right? But not as much volume comparatively as way up here. So this definitely wants to be pulled back up. And gold, right? Same sort of idea as the other ones, and gold hasn't been dropping as hard as the rest. So kind of good sign, really. As low as it could go, probably 1903. Don't know how likely that's going to be, though. March 16th, it kind of went down low again. but now it's every single peak that it's making higher peaks and higher lows from this point onward. So yeah, I think we've kind of tapered off there. Oil's been another one. It dropped hard, but as you see, every time it drops, it doesn't drop to its original destination, doesn't drop any lower, right? So we could definitely be seeing a pullback down to anywhere around the 90s, um, high 90s, I would say, maybe around here, but hard to say. It's been is somewhat consolidating. I mean, it has been dropping slowly, but this doesn't really tell me that it wants to move in any specific direction right now. Overall, we know that oil is still very volatile, but if we see any patterns emerging, it is definitely a bullish wedge, right? So keep an eye on that one. Nasdaq, scary drop on the long term, right? So we switch over to the daily time frame. All right, all these lines are kind of meaningless right now. I have it done up on my other chart, so I will dump. Okay, and saved on that one, so I'm not too concerned. So on the Nasdaq, as I was explaining, right? So if I'll do a kind of a top and bottom comparison of Nasdaq and let's go Bitcoin, right? So we'll throw Bitcoin right here. It's really interesting how my two Nasdaqs are completely different. Why is that? What did I draw up here? Okay, well, whatever. We'll do it on this guy. Let's see, Bitcoin. Here we go. Okay. All right, so this is what I see here. Right, so this was, I'll move that up. This was kind of November 11th on Bitcoin, and this was November 22nd on the NASDAQ, right? So if we line them up, it would be something like that, right? I have to stretch out the NASDAQ a little bit because Bitcoin doesn't stop, while as NASDAQ has 2 days break, right? But overall, I mean, like I said, I'll stretch this out just so we can kind of get a better idea, right? So something around that. Okay, so as you see, forgive the crudeness, but I hope that this kind of brings it to light, right? So as we see on these patterns, right, we have up, kind of peaks twice, drops down hard, rallies a little bit, drops hard, goes up, drops, kind of this zigzag pattern that we have. Okay, and the NASDAQ, kind of the same thing, but we kind of peaked right there, dropped, similar idea, dropped hard, right, rallied a little bit, dropped hard, pulled up a little bit, dropped hard, and then finally started climbing, and now we're pulling back, right? Kind of a crude drawing, I guess, but you know what? Let's get creative with this. Let's do add symbol, and watch this, right? We can do BTC USD, all. Okay, we'll do BTC USD, right, plus US NAS 100. Well, I'll just do NAS 100, NAS 100. Okay, which one do I have now? That guy. Okay, so the way that it's added there first, and now I'm going to do plus BTC USD. Okay. Okay, so now we close, enter. So what did I just add? Right there. Okay, so I'm going to drop this, switch this back over to 1. Okay, I'll delete that drawing. We don't need any crude black lines on that. And now we'll click this to see how much they overlap each other. Okay, and that's kind of what they look like when they're brought together. Now, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but the thing is, when you add kind of pairs on top of each other like this, they overlap themselves a little bit, right? So the gaps that you see here is where it doesn't line up. So this is pretty close as to how everything's been looking like, right? So NASDAQ, right? It's right. So where you see November 11th, right? This is kind of where it's been lining up. So it's interesting kind of how to read into this a little bit, right? Jan 25th, Feb 24, right? So this is kind of the comparison between the two because we know March 15th was lower on the NASDAQ than February 24th was, right? But as you see, overall, very similar movement between the two pairs, right? So if I do something like this, let's do 3, right? So we'll compare it like this, right? So NAS is on top, NAS is right there, and Bitcoin will be right here. So let's see what that looks like. Did I delete Bitcoin? What did I do? Maybe I did. Okay, well, that's fine. BTC, USD, click. Yeah, all right. Okay, so there's that. This is just the NASDAQ. I really don't know why it's drawn up like that, but anyway. So daily, right? Zoom in on this a little bit. Oh, sorry, wrong way. Zoom out, I mean. Okay, so, and right here, zoom out on Bitcoin. All right, so now you're gonna see if I put a line on top, it's gonna be following the cursor both on the NASDAQ here and on Bitcoin here. So let's just see where comparatively all these peak. All right, so November 10th, that's where it was. And then Bitcoin started dropping, right? And the NASDAQ kind of dropped a little bit as well, but it rallied, right? Similar rally to what we saw in Bitcoin. And then it started dropping hard, right? It dropped really hard when Bitcoin dropped really hard. And then as Bitcoin started to slowly rally, NASDAQ dropped once more before pulling back up. You know, now what we see is both of them slightly going up. NASDAQ kind of going sideways. Now they're both dropping. You know, a little bit of a rally, but not higher than its previous peak. Then a drop, a little bit of a move up, drop, right? But we saw that NASDAQ dropped a little lower the second time than it did the first. And then a big pull up, and then sideways movement, and then back down, right? And NASDAQ dropped a little harder than Bitcoin did. But as you saw right here, okay, that big drop down, right? And now it's starting to go sideways. The NASDAQ typically is delayed by a day, as you've seen, right? So right here, we're pulled up, right, on Bitcoin. The NASDAQ did that 2 days later, right? Where it dropped right here on Bitcoin, right? So after its peak, and it dropped the next day, the NASDAQ kind of didn't go anywhere and dropped the following day. So if right now, just assuming that it's following this kind of trend, if Bitcoin is balanced out right now, the NASDAQ shouldn't be going anywhere Monday. And wherever Bitcoin goes Monday, that'll be a good indication as to where the NASDAQ will go on Tuesday. Again, that's just speculation, but from what I've seen, it seems to be pretty consistent as far as the movements go. So yeah, that's just some guesswork at the end of that. All right, folks, that kind of brings the Forex side of things to the conclusion. I'll see you for the chart review. Now, please like and subscribe the videos and comment to give me any sort of information that you want addressed in the future. Take care.